Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my name is Chad Riley, and today I have for you the culmination of the last year of my life. When College Football 25 came out, I was extremely excited. My favorite thing to do in sports video games are to rebuild the worst franchise or team that I can find and make them into a powerhouse, win some championships, and then either start over, find another team that's really bad, maybe an expansion franchise, or move on to a different sports game. Now, when College Football 25 came out, I all of a sudden had 134 teams I can rebuild, which it gave me so much to do, and I decided to try and rebuild all 134 teams. Now, this ended up being quite the task. 134 teams in less than a year until College Football 26 came out proved to be impossible for me. With 134 teams, I can rebuild using mainly randomly generated players. Every 4 years, all of the real-life players are now gone. So I can make my own storylines using these randomly generated players. I can set records with people I recruit, and that's always the most fun part for me in these sport video games. I'd rather draft a player and see him turn into Tom Brady, Wayne Gretzky, whatever it is, than to build up someone who is already established in real life, already has a career, already in the game. So this was the way to do it for me, where I have now all of the players I want, I can rebuild and create these storylines for. So I made a goal of rebuilding all 134 teams. I made a spreadsheet listing the teams from worst overall to best overall. I picked Ball State and I got to work rebuilding them. Now, originally I wanted to make videos of every single rebuild as well and document them so that none of my players would fall through the cracks. All their storylines would be ingrained on my YouTube channel forever and I could go back and rewatch them whenever I wanted to. But after my Ball State rebuild, which you can actually see playing in the background, I had a problem. See, with these rebuilds being such a tall order, I decided to use fast and slow sim only. So no user input would be taken into account on any of these games. All of it relies on the computer sim system, the players I recruit, coaching schemes and playbooks of the college, and that would determine how long these rebuilds would go. I mainly wanted to see if there was a coach style that was easy to win with, if there were any playbooks that were easier, and I didn't want to negatively or positively impact that, aside from which players I brought in so I could see them grow throughout their career and I could watch them build something. But by doing this, I kind of produced a quite boring product. As you can see in the background video, we've been going now for almost 10 minutes. We haven't even gotten into a game. I'm pretty much just in the menu, which is what I was doing pretty much all of these rebuilds. I was just in the menu most of the time. But it's quite boring to watch. I would really only jump into games if there were recruits and I wanted to see the game do well, or if we were in the college football playoffs. So for the most part, I'm not even watching the games. I'm really just fast simming my way through these seasons in order to get the best team possible so then we can make the playoffs and then we can move on to a new dynasty. So after one or two attempts at this and then my editing, I decided to really not focus on making videos of my dynasties and really just focused on the storylines I produce, the statistics of the games, finishing as many dynasties as I could, really building out my own college football story as opposed to each individual school's story. I ended up finishing 26 dynasties fit in league with College Football 26 coming out. I did face burnout quite a few times. There were 2 or 3 times I would take like a few week break, and it really hit recently as I was doing my Sam Houston dynasty, my last one. It took me about a month to go through 6 seasons, so I ended up calling it there, and I'm gonna make this video wrap it all up into a bow, tie it together. So going through the strategy of the first few, Ball State, I kind of spent trying to figure out how college football would work. I had never done recruiter before. I had done a user dynasty with my brother. I was playing motivator, but I'd never done recruiter before, so this was a good opportunity to really dive deep into the recruiting system, which definitely set the baseline for the rest of my dynasty challenge here. Learn what worked in recruiting, what didn't. There's a creator out there called Max Plays College Football. He did a video out there where he would give points to letter grades of your school grades when recruiting. He did the math on how many points you would need in order for it to be worth it to hard sell or soft sell as opposed to just send in the house, especially for schools that you can only put 50 hours on a recruit. I used that and combined with my recruiting strategy to figure out what works best and who I should be target in, who's kind of a waste of time, who's not going to come to the school if another school sweeps in. I got pretty lucky. I won in 7 years, and I don't know if I really learned my lesson that much. With Kennesaw State, it took 18 years to win a national championship, so it kind of ended up being the opposite. I had tactician, and I definitely did not play optimally in that dynasty, and that is why it took so many years. I thought I kind of knew what I was doing, but I really was just recruiting the best available players, and I wasn't taking into account the school playbook. I wasn't taking into account what my tactician upgrades were. I was just maxing it out. Anytime I got coach points, I would put it into tactician and level it up. But I wasn't thinking if it actually affects players in this playstyle. I was recruiting field generals when maybe I should have been a scrambler, or my defense where I had only run support safeties, for instance, because those are the easiest to recruit at the end of the recruiting cycle when everyone already gets their safeties. I definitely played that suboptimally, and then I got UL Monroe, and I won in 7 years again, with a team that definitely should not have won. I got very, very lucky. So I was pretty lost in those first 3 dynasties. But when I got to Buffalo, things started to really click for me. And I got to realize, okay, here's the type of player I should be recruiting for this play style. Here's Makaputu, the first ever elite recruit I got. Buffalo was the first time I really started to figure things out. I got my first 99 overall player in David Hunter, a running back. But I really wasn't tested until Air Force. That is the option offense. Let's just say slow and fast sim hate the run. It was so hard to win on option playbooks, and it really kind of put things to the test and really honed in on, okay, you have to recruit certain players for different playbooks. In Akron, I kind of figured out the position change cheese. You could get scrambler, quarterbacks, put them at outside linebacker, and they would be a speed rusher. They wouldn't progress for 2 years, but then when you move them to defensive line, all of a sudden they're like a 90 overall speed rusher. Different things like that. I figured out all these different cheeses at different positions, offensive lineman to tight end, you get 99 overall. And then I got to Army, and I kind of stopped caring. I was like 10 dynasties deep, and I'm like, I'm not going to spend 3 hours every single season making sure I have the best optimized players because I moved them around in different positions all the time. After that, it kind of all just turned into monotony and just getting through as many dynasties as possible, really trying to get the best stats. That was kind of what brought me through all of these dynasties. I wanted to set new records. Going through the actual data collection here, I would go through and type in which school I'm working on. I have all 134 schools here lined up. They're all sorted by overall start, which was at the start of the year, so the roster updates kind of messed with that a little bit, but it is what it is. And then I count how many years it took me to win, how many of those win seasons, different star level of the school overalls, what coach archetype I used, what playbooks I used, my record, how many conference championships, all the recruits I had, their dev traits, how many people were drafted. I like to keep track of the Heisman winner and the national championship winner, how many Heismans I won, and all that good stuff. So we'll just go through the averages of everything here. On average, it took me 8.73 years to win a national championship. 6.5 of those were winning seasons. My overall at the end normally was about 90 overall. The main takeaway here was which coach archetype was better, and that was kind of my goal at the start of this. I ended up thinking recruiter was the best. On average, it'd take me 6.1 seasons to win a national championship, whereas tactician and motivator were both 9. I felt like recruiter was the best. It was able to get you players that could play right away and have an impact on the lower overall schools and really jump them up faster. The best playbooks ended up being Air Raid. These are all kind of skewed because 7 of the schools I did were spread, and it really came down to what the playbooks the coaches had, or the schools had before I was even there. But I ended up having Air Raid be the lowest with only 2 schools, and the highest being Pistol, actually, not even option. And I had an 18-year rebuild with Kennesaw State that had Pistol, and a 12-year rebuild with Ohio that had Pistol. Both of those were kind of before I figured out the positions and player archetypes you need for each playbook. I give that maybe a little bit of leeway, but yeah, Pistol ended up being the worst. On defense, 4-3 multiple was the worst. I only use it with Air Force. Actually, all the multiple defenses are really just military schools. So excluding those, 4-2-5 ended up being the hardest for us, with a 9.67 season average to win a national championship. and we had 9 different schools using that playbook. So that one seemed to be the worst. 3-2-6. I had 2 schools with an average of 6. I think I won a national championship in 6 games with both schools. I think 3-3-5 is probably the best in sim, at least. On average, I would win 85 games and lose 38 before I won a national championship. I usually won around 42.5 coach level. I would win about 1 coach of the year. I would usually dominate my rivals. I had a tough time with record versus top 25. A lot of times, especially if I was tactician, I kind of forced as many ranked games as possible to try to get the upgrade for tactician. So you end up losing a bunch, but it ended up being about 12 wins to 8 losses against top 25. I'd win about 3.5 conference championships. On average, the best recruiting class I would get is around 9. Now, sometimes I did get the best class, and I wrote down the best stats. My best recruit of all time was actually Navy. I ended up getting a 265 point class, which is higher than any other one I would do. On average, it would take about 163 recruits to win a national championship. Of those 163 recruits, I get 10 5-stars, 44 4-stars, 103 stars, 8 2-stars, and I'd usually recruit 1 1-star just for fun. Of those 163 recruits, 54 of them would be normal dev, 65 would be impact, 32 would be star, and 12 would be elite. Elite really wasn't that common. Some seasons I would get like 3 elites in a recruiting class, and then I wouldn't get elite for 4 more seasons. In these rebuilds, I had an average of 17 players getting drafted, with 4.6 of them being in the first round. Like I said previously, I tracked the Heisman winner of the first year and the national champion of the first year, just to compare to real life. Jalen Milroe won Heisman 8 times in my rebuild, so college football really loves Jalen Milroe. No time was Travis Hunter a winner. 2-way player really is underutilized in college football 25, which is crazy because he literally won a Heisman and he's on the cover. Sim also really loves Oregon. Oregon won 10 of my 26 rebuilds in the first year. Ohio State, I think, won once. The sim isn't super accurate to real life, but with 134 teams, there are so many possibilities, I give it a little bit of leeway. I would have about 3.15 players win position players of the year in my dynasties. I only ever won a Heisman once, and that was with Braden Hayden at Ohio. He was a scrambler quarterback. I think he threw like 39 touchdowns and had 12 on the ground or something crazy like that. So he had a really good year, but that was the only time I ever won a Heisman. So it seems really hard to win Heisman, at least in fast sim and slow sim situations. It would take me about 2.5 times making the playoffs before I actually won a national championship. On average, my winning record would be about 15 wins and a loss. So if I got to that 15 win number, I could win a national championship. I would usually place 7th in the college football brackets. That did seem to be probably tied because I did a lot of MAC rebuilds and Sunbelt rebuilds, which are all, the lower overall teams. You got an easier schedule, and that's probably why I ended up getting kind of lower placements. We defeated Notre Dame 4 times in the national championship. That was the most common team to play up against. On average, we'd win 29-15 in the national championship, and the team, ironically enough, that we would normally play was also 7th. I don't know why this 7th seed ends up making such a run, but that was quite an interesting finding. That's kind of what we saw with the averages. Another thing I wanted to keep track of was how high you could get players overall, and then what position archetypes were the best at getting to that point. This was a little bit skewed because some archetypes are just easier to recruit. That's a little bit skewed, but we'll go through it anyway. The best quarterback I got was 96 overall. Braden Hayden, the Heisman winner, didn't even make my top 4. I had 4 99 overall running backs. All of them except for David Hunter were receiving backs. So fullback, unsurprisingly, they were all military schools. I had a 90 overall at Navy and an 87 overall at Air Force. Receivers actually seem to be quite hard to get to a higher level. I had 4 99 overall running backs. My best receiver was only a 94, and I only had 2 of them. So receivers seemed hard to build up. Tight ends, I did the glitch a few times where you could get athlete tight end, put them at offensive line for 2 years, get that skill boost, and then move them to tight end. All of a sudden, they're 99 overall. I had some 99 overall blocking tight ends, definitely by far the easiest to get to a 99. The best offensive lineman I had, a 98 offensive tackle, a 98 offensive guard, and a 97 center. So you could get them pretty high, but they work pretty hard to come by. Seemed like offensive guard was easier to level up than the offensive tackles. Centers were kind of in the middle. Defensive end, I never got 99, but I did get 98, and I got 297s. So defensive ends, again, doing the speed rusher cheese where you can put them at outside linebacker, then move them to defensive end, seemed to be pretty good. But actually, most of these guys that were higher up are all power rushers. So it seems like power rusher is the easiest to level up. And then, like you see here, all run stopper defensive tackles, except for I have one power rusher. Outside linebackers were tough half the time. We're running a 4-2 or a 3-2, and you don't end up even using outside linebackers all that much. But I did end up getting a few 97s. Middle linebackers, again, a lot of the playbooks you don't even end up using the middle linebackers that much, but I did get 298s and then 497s. So all defensive backs I felt like kind of peaked. Many times I would get a cornerback or safety up to like an 87, 88, 89 overall in their sophomore year, and then they would peak at. They wouldn't progress in the last 3 years of their career with skill cap room. It wasn't like they were capped out. They had plenty of room. I just don't know where their training points were going. And there were years where I would do the position change cheese, where you move a cornerback to safety, then back to cornerback, and it automatically gives them all of the abilities, so you don't have to waste training points on them. And then in the offseason, they still wouldn't grow at all in overall. So it was really frustrating. The best I could get my corner was a 94. Best I could get my safety was a 94. I think my biggest frustration with this whole process of trying to get the highest overall players, I got a kicker to 91 one time and he didn't get drafted. Just can't. Your kickers and punters don't get drafted. I was so frustrated. Cameron Yoder from Bowling Green was a 91 overall. No team in the NFL wanted to spend a 7th round pick on him. Like, that's insane to me. So this is where I would track all of the stats for players that I went through. I'm not going to go through every single individual category, but basically I keep track of passing yards, pass touchdowns, rushing yards and touchdowns, receptions, receiving yards and touchdowns, tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles, field goals, punts, and returns. And I would do that for career, season, and then individual game stats, which were a little bit different, but it was essentially just adding in pancakes or offensive linemen. My biggest grief here is that there isn't a lot of stats for offensive linemen. You can only really keep track of how many sacks they gave up. And so the best stats there would be players who didn't play. The worst stats there would be players who played since they were a freshman, but probably your best overall. So I didn't really track that. That's why I added in pancakes for individual games, just to kind of give a semblance of, this guy was really good. He had this many pancakes in a game. This was probably the longest part of the process. It would take me about an hour to go through a season, and then like 30 to 45 minutes to take the stats of that season. I would go to the career page. Did anyone beat Jason Small at 15,000 passing yards? No. Okay. Passing touchdowns? No. Okay. Rushing touchdowns? Oh, someone did. Joe Lolito, write them down. All the way through, then do it for season stats. And then I would go into each individual game to the stats section. How many passing yards was thrown this game? Is that a record? No. Okay. Passing touchdowns? Oh, that's a record. Rushing yards? All the way through every single game, every single season, just to keep these stats, which I actually didn't really mind. I kind of love the stats and seeing, like I said before, my favorite part of this was breaking records and getting the best possible score, So for Akron, I had 14 receiving yards in one game by Bobby Golden. The whole rest of the time, I'm trying to see if I can beat that in a game. Obviously, I won't do that at a military school, but then like Hawaii with the veer and shoot, I have a real possibility here. So it was really exciting kind of in that regard. All the ones highlighted in green, those are the all-time records. I was never able to beat those in all the rebuilds, and I kept that also in this tab. So yeah, overall, I think my key takeaways here is that running in College Football 25 felt very under-tuned, and passing was definitely the most consistent way to win natties. You'll see that in a lot of my rebuilds with the lower years. The passing yards was actually higher. Defense almost felt random. I could see how different schemes produced different stats at the different positions, and different players would get a lot of sacks in this defense, but interceptions and forced fumbles definitely felt random. Even with DB heavy schemes, my DBs wouldn't necessarily get more interceptions than a base set somewhere. It really just felt random. I guess, I don't know, it was mainly frustrating when you had a player with like a interceptions play style, a defensive back, and it's like, I don't know how to guarantee that you don't want to transfer if we don't get enough interceptions when you're kind of the guy getting the interceptions. Like I said previously, offensive line stats were criminally ignored. I could only find them in the individual games, and even then it's just pancakes, sacks, and downs played. So I guess maybe I could have tracked like a percentage of sacks given up based on the downs played and tracked offensive line that way, but that felt so in depth, and I already spent too much time doing this, so I didn't want to do that. But yeah, overall, I mean, that's pretty much it. I had a lot of fun doing this. It was very, very fulfilling for me to try and beat my own records in sim, or like see a player, you recruit a 4-star elite and you don't have anyone at that position, and you have a real opportunity to break those records. That was the most fun for me. If I continue to do this in College Football 26, that would be what I would most look forward to. I really do wish I had videos for every single dynasty just so I could showcase these storylines that I came across. Like I said previously, I think it was kind of boring. I also think that editing every single video would have probably cut like 2 or 3 dynasties from this process, just the amount of time it would have taken. While I am disappointed that I wasn't able to do that, I do think that was probably the right decision, at least for this one. Some of my favorite storylines I just want to quickly touch on for myself is David Hunter carrying my Buffalo Dynasty, my first 99 overall running back. I had a running back named Trent Day who scored more touchdowns in his freshman and sophomore year than any other running back in the entire 26 dynasties. Troy Holiday got 12 pancakes in one game at Jacksonville State. Braden Hayden winning my only Heisman. BJ Delmas hit a walk-off field goal to win a national championship for Georgia State. Jordan Ross, I recruited in like 4 or 5 dynasties because he was always in the transfer portal. Emmanuel Mo returned 4 return touchdowns and did not win Returner of the Year, which was insane to me. My first ever elite recruit, Maka Putu, tore up Ball State and became a legend in his own right, and then the next year Mike Mixon broke all his records, and so now Makaputu is nowhere in my record books. But yeah, College Football 25 coming to an end is bittersweet. I think if I continue this project into College Football 26, I'll probably alter it. It'll include user input in the games. That way I think it's maybe a little bit more interesting to watch. So if I do want to make videos, people can actually watch it without seeing me in the menu for 45 minutes. I really loved watching these games though, so it would really be minimal. I mean, maybe like 2 or 3 games a year I would play the moments, and then probably the playoffs. But like I was saying earlier, the burnout from this did feel real, and normally after like season 7 or 8 or 9 I'd get the team up to 90 plus overall, and I was really just waiting for Sim to kick in and win us the national championship, which could take sometimes 10 years, but usually like 2 or 3 years, and then I would win a national championship. I really didn't care anymore. I just wanted to win and move on, which was kind of defeating the point of the process. I really wanted to enjoy playing these games. So hopefully if I mix in some user input into the future in College Football 26, it'll make those dynasties, even if they last that long, maybe a bit more enjoyable to play, and then maybe it would make it more interesting to watch. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. If anyone does watch this, I really appreciate you taking the time to experience what dynasty rebuilds look like for me, and maybe I'll see you in College Football 26. All right. Thanks, guys.